You keep ending up in the same kind of relationship. Different face, different name, different city maybe, but somehow the same dynamic, the same push and pull, the same feeling of almost being loved, but not quite. And if someone asked you why, you probably wouldn't have a clean answer. You'd shrug and say something like, "I just have bad luck," or "I pick the wrong people." But luck isn't what's happening here. And by the end of this, you'll understand why the person you become in love is not really you choosing freely. It's a much older version of you, still trying to finish something that was never resolved. Let's start with the paradox at the center of all of this. Most of us believe we want healthy love. We say we want someone who is consistent, kind, present, secure, and we mean it. We're not lying to ourselves. But then, over and over again, we find ourselves drawn to people who recreate a very specific kind of emotional tension that we already know. Not because we're masochists, not because we're broken, but because the nervous system doesn't chase happiness, it chases familiarity. The psychologist John Bowlby, who spent decades studying how early bonds between children and caregivers shape the rest of a person's emotional life, put it this way: the patterns we develop in childhood to stay connected to the people who feed and protect us become the blueprint for every intimate relationship we have as adults. He called this attachment theory, and while the term has become something of a cultural buzzword in the last few years, what it actually describes is still quietly devastating when you sit with it. You didn't choose your blueprint. It was built for you, mostly before you were old enough to have any say in the matter. The conventional approach to fixing this is to read a self-help book, figure out your attachment style, label yourself as anxious or avoidant or disorganized, and then resolve to do better. And I understand why that's appealing. Labels feel like clarity. Clarity feels like control. But here's where the conventional approach makes things worse instead of better. When you treat your attachment wounds as a problem to be solved through information, you're essentially trying to think your way out of something that lives in your body, your nervous system, your automatic responses. It's like trying to stop a sneeze by deciding not to. The mechanism runs deeper than the decision, so let's go deeper. What actually happens in childhood when the environment around you is unpredictable, frightening, cold, or simply not attuned to your emotional needs? The developmental psychologist Mary Ainsworth conducted a now famous series of experiments in the 1960s and 70s called the strange situation. She observed how infants responded when their caregiver briefly left the room and then returned. What she found was stunning in its simplicity. Infants who had consistent, responsive caregivers were distressed when the caregiver left, but quickly soothed when they came back. They had what she called a secure base. Infants whose caregivers were unpredictable or emotionally unavailable responded very differently. Some became hypervigilant, clinging, and inconsolable even after the caregiver returned, as if they couldn't trust that the safety was real. Others seemed to shut down entirely, appearing not to care, but showing physiological signs of significant stress when measured. Two very different strategies, both adaptive, both learned before the age of 1. Now here's the part that should stop you for a moment. Those infants grew up, they became adults, and those same strategies, the hypervigilance, the emotional shutdown, the inability to trust repair, they didn't disappear. They just put on grown-up clothes. The anxious infant became the adult who texts 3 times before getting a response and catastrophizes silence into abandonment. The avoidant infant became the adult who pulls back the moment intimacy starts to feel real, not because they don't care, but because closeness, at a biological level, still registers as danger. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroscience. The psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk spent over 30 years studying trauma and its effects on the body. In his research, he found that traumatic experiences, including the chronic low-grade trauma of emotional neglect or inconsistent caregiving, are encoded not as memories that you can rationally examine, but as physical states. A certain tone of voice, a particular kind of silence in a room, the way someone turns away from you. These sensory cues can activate a full stress response in the body before your conscious mind has even registered what's happening. You feel the fear, the withdrawal, the desperate urge to fix or flee, and only afterward do you construct a story to explain it. The story is almost always wrong, or at least it's describing the present situation through the lens of a wound from the past. Think of it this way. Imagine you burned your hand on a stove when you were 4 years old. You don't consciously think about that every day, but your hand still flinches away from heat, even heat that isn't dangerous, even warmth that's offered kindly. Your nervous system learned something, and it kept the lesson longer than your memory did. Childhood relational wounds work the same way. The people who hurt you, or who weren't able to show up for you, didn't just affect your past. They installed a kind of early warning system in you that is still running, still scanning, still responding to threats that may no longer exist. And this is where it gets genuinely hard to sit with, because these patterns don't just shape who you're attracted to. They shape how you behave when you're afraid. They shape what you ask for and what you never ask for. They shape the ways you protect yourself that also, quietly, keep love at a distance. There's a concept in psychotherapy called repetition compulsion, first described by Sigmund Freud, though he wasn't entirely right about why it happens. The idea is that humans have a powerful unconscious drive to recreate familiar emotional dynamics, even painful ones, not out of self-destruction, but out of a kind of unfinished business. If your parent was emotionally unavailable, you may spend your adult life unconsciously seeking out emotionally unavailable partners, not because you like suffering, but because some part of you is still trying to solve the original problem, still trying to finally be chosen by the person who withholds, still trying to earn the love that should have been unconditional, still trying to win a game that was never yours to win. The philosopher and novelist Iris Murdoch once wrote that love is the extremely difficult realization that something other than oneself is real. And I think she was getting at something that attachment wounds make almost impossible. When you're operating from a place of early wounding, the person in front of you is never quite fully real to you. They are, at least in part, a stand-in, a screen onto which you project the original relationship that shaped you. You're not fully falling in love with them. You're falling in love with the possibility that this time, the story ends differently. So what do you do with that? This is where I want to offer a reframe, and I want to be honest that it doesn't make the pain go away, but I think it changes its meaning, and changing meaning changes everything. The psychologist Carl Jung had a concept he called the shadow. It refers to the parts of ourselves we've had to hide, suppress, or deny in order to remain acceptable and lovable within our early environment. If you grew up in a house where anger was dangerous, you learned to suppress your anger. If you grew up in a house where needing things made you a burden, you learned to present yourself as needing nothing. The shadow isn't just the dark or shameful parts of us. It's everything we had to exile in order to survive. And here's what Jung observed. The things we exile don't disappear. They go underground, and then they run us from below, showing up as irrational reactions, disproportionate responses, attractions we can't explain, behaviors we don't understand in ourselves. Jung believed that the work of psychological maturity, what he called individuation, was essentially the work of getting to know your shadow, not to eliminate it because you can't, but to integrate it, to look at it clearly and say, this part of me exists. It was formed for a reason. It served a purpose once, and now I get to decide how much power it has over my choices. This connects to something Erich Fromm explored in his extraordinary 1956 book, The Art of Loving. Fromm argued, against almost every romantic idea we hold in Western culture, that love is not a feeling that happens to you. It's a practice, a discipline, an art form that requires knowledge and effort. He wrote that most people see the problem of love primarily as the problem of being loved, rather than the problem of loving. In other words, we spend our lives trying to become worthy of love, trying to be attractive enough, successful enough, emotionally compelling enough, rather than developing our actual capacity to love. And Fromm thought, this got the whole thing backwards. Love is not something you receive when you're finally enough. It's something you do. And doing it well requires knowing yourself, including the parts of yourself that were shaped by pain. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust and wrote Man's Search for Meaning, offers another angle here. Frankl believed that between stimulus and response, there is always a space. In that space lies your freedom and your power to choose. When your attachment wound is triggered, when someone's silence reads as abandonment, when closeness starts to feel like a trap, what is happening is that your stimulus and your response have been collapsed. There is no space. The trigger happens, and the behavior follows, almost automatically. The goal is not to never be triggered. The goal is to slowly, with a lot of patience and a lot of self-compassion, rebuild that space, to insert a pause between what you feel and what you do. This is not about becoming someone who doesn't feel deeply. The people who feel most deeply are often the ones whose early environments demanded the most of their nervous systems. That sensitivity isn't the problem. It's actually one of the most beautiful things about them. The problem is when that sensitivity has no framework, no understanding, no room to breathe. When you can't tell the difference between what's happening now and what happened then. The Stoics had a practice they called prosoche, which roughly translates to self-attention or watchful attention to oneself. Marcus Aurelius returned to it again and again in his private journals. The idea was not to suppress what you feel, but to observe it, to become, as much as possible, a witness to your own inner life. Not so you could control everything, because you can't, but so that you could respond rather than react. So that you could be in the moment rather than inside the past. This is the reframe. Your attachment wounds are not your identity. They are the artifact of an intelligent nervous system that learned to protect you in an environment where you were small and had no other options. That learning was, in its time, adaptive. It helped you survive. But you are not that child anymore. You have resources now that the child didn't have. You have language. You have the ability to reflect. You have the ability to choose, with effort, differently than your defaults. The question is not whether your childhood shaped you. It did. Profoundly. Undeniably. The question is whether you will spend the rest of your life being governed by that shaping, or whether you will slowly, imperfectly, with a lot of setbacks, begin to author something new. Now here is where I want to move from understanding to something more lived, because here's the honest thing. Knowing all of this intellectually changes almost nothing on its own. I've had entire conversations with people who could describe their attachment style in clinical detail, who understood the neuroscience, who had read every book, and who still found themselves 3 months later texting an ex at 2 in the morning, wondering why they couldn't stop. Understanding is the map. It is not the territory. The work is in the territory. So what does that work actually look like? I want to offer you 3 invitations, not prescriptions, not homework. Invitations, because this only works if you come to it willingly, and because each of these will probably feel uncomfortable the first time you sit with them, and that discomfort is actually the point. The first invitation is this. The next time you have a strong emotional reaction in a relationship, a wave of anxiety, a sudden urge to withdraw, a flash of disproportionate anger, before you act on it or explain it away, try to ask yourself, how old does this feeling feel? Not how old am I, but how old does this feel? Because often, when the reaction is very large and the present situation doesn't fully justify it, you are not primarily reacting to what is happening now. You are reacting from somewhere much earlier. And just asking the question, naming that there might be a younger version of you present in this moment, can sometimes create just enough distance for a different choice to become possible. The second invitation is harder. It asks you to get curious about the patterns you keep repeating, not judgmentally, not as evidence of how broken you are, but with genuine curiosity, as if you were a scientist looking at interesting data. What is the emotional dynamic you keep recreating? What does it feel like in your body? What is the story it seems to confirm about you or about love? Because patterns this persistent always have a logic. They always make sense within the context of where they came from. And when you can see that logic clearly, when you can say, I learned that love feels like this particular tension, because that was the only version of love available to me early on, something loosens. You're no longer identifying with the pattern. You're observing it. And that's the beginning of something. The third invitation is the one most people resist the most. And it's this: let yourself be loved in small ways without immediately testing it or dismissing it or waiting for it to be taken away. This sounds simple, and it is enormously difficult, because if your early experience taught you that love is conditional, unpredictable, or ultimately withheld, your nervous system will be suspicious of love that feels safe and available. It will look for the catch. It will create distance just to see if the person will close it. It will provoke to see if they'll stay. The invitation is not to stop doing those things overnight, because you probably won't. The invitation is to notice when you're doing it, to say to yourself, I am testing this person because some part of me doesn't believe the safety is real, and I don't fully believe it yet, but I'm willing to watch and see. I want to be honest with you about something. This work is not linear. You will have breakthroughs followed by long stretches of feeling like nothing has changed. You will understand something deeply and then watch yourself do the old thing again anyway. That is not failure. That is how deeply ingrained these patterns are, and also how very human it is to change slowly and inconsistently. The goal is not transformation. The goal is direction. Are you, on balance, over time, a little more self-aware than you were? A little more able to choose rather than react? A little more capable of receiving love without immediately bracing for its withdrawal? That's enough. That's actually a lot. There's a line from the writer and philosopher Alain de Botton that I come back to often. He writes that we need to replace the romantic view of relationships with a more classical one. Relationships are not the place where we find a perfect person who will finally love us correctly. They are the classroom in which we learn about ourselves, and what your childhood taught you about love, however painful, however limiting, is not a sentence. It is the starting material. You didn't choose it, but what you do with it, that part belongs to you. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke, writing in his Letters to a Young Poet, said this: perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest essence, something helpless that wants our love. I think that's what the wounded parts of us are. Not enemies, not evidence of failure, but old, frightened parts of us, doing the only thing they know how to do, waiting for us to turn toward them with something other than shame. This kind of conversation is part of something larger, a project of taking psychology and philosophy seriously, not as academic disciplines, but as tools for actually living. If that's the kind of conversation you want more of, subscribing means you won't miss the next one. And I'm genuinely curious, if you want to leave something in the comments, what's one belief about love that you've carried for most of your life that you're starting to suspect you didn't actually choose?